The grand hall of the Zorinthian Empire was filled with warriors, nobles, and diplomats from across the stars. Golden banners with the empire's symbol hung from the towering pillars, and a massive crystal throne stood at the center. Seated on it was Emperor Varkan, ruler of the mighty Zorinthians. Before him stood Princess Xyra, his only daughter, her arms crossed, her golden eyes burning with defiance. Her long, dark blue hair shimmered under the glowing chandeliers. Xyra was known for her strength in battle, her sharp mind, and her deep loyalty to her people. But today, she was furious. "I refuse this arrangement," she declared loudly, her voice echoing through the hall. "Father, I will mate with anyone, but not a human." A murmur spread through the crowd. Zorinthians were a warrior race, proud and strong. They respected power above all. And now their princess was being asked to consider a human as a mate. It was unthinkable. Standing near the throne was Daniel Carter, the human ambassador from Earth. He kept his expression calm, though he could feel the weight of hundreds of alien eyes watching him. He was not a warrior like the Zorinthians. He had no sharp claws, no superhuman strength, but he had something else: intelligence, determination, and the ability to survive against all odds. Emperor Varkan sighed, rubbing his temples. "Xyra, this is not just about you. This is about peace between our people and the humans. The Earth Alliance is growing stronger, and we need this union to secure the future." Xyra clenched her fists. "I will fight for our people. I will lead armies, but I will not lower myself to be with a weak, fragile human." She spat the word as if it was an insult. Daniel finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. "Princess Xyra, I am not asking you to accept me. I am only here as a representative of Earth. If you refuse, then so be it." His brown eyes met hers without fear. "But don't reject me because of what I am. Reject me because I failed to prove myself." Xyra narrowed her eyes. "Prove yourself," she repeated, almost amused. "How can a human prove anything to us?" The Emperor leaned forward, interested in Daniel's response. Daniel shrugged. "I may not be as strong as a Zorinthian, but strength isn't everything. If you give me a chance, I will show you what humans are capable of." The room was silent for a moment. Then the Emperor smiled. "Very well. If my daughter doubts your worth, then she should test it." Xyra's eyes widened. "Father, you can't be serious." "I am serious," the Emperor interrupted. "You will create a challenge for Daniel. If he fails, the alliance is off. But if he succeeds, you will reconsider your words." Xyra smirked. If her father wanted a test, she would make sure it was impossible for the human to pass. "Fine," she said, turning to Daniel. "Tomorrow, we begin. But know this, human, you will regret stepping into our world." Daniel didn't flinch. He simply nodded. "Then I look forward to tomorrow, Princess." As the hall erupted in whispers, Daniel knew one thing for sure. This was just the beginning. The training grounds of the Zorinthian Empire were unlike anything Daniel had ever seen. Towering stone pillars surrounded the massive open arena, where warriors trained under the blazing twin suns. The ground was rough, marked with deep scars from past battles. Massive Zorinthian warriors sparred in the distance, their sharp claws and powerful strikes shaking the ground. Daniel stood in the center, surrounded by an audience of nobles, warriors, and curious onlookers. They had all come to witness the human fail. At the front, Princess Xyra stood with her arms crossed, wearing her warrior armor, a sleek black and gold battle suit that enhanced her strength. She had spent the night designing a challenge that no human could ever hope to complete. She wanted to end this nonsense before it even began. "The challenge is simple, human," she said, her voice loud and clear. "You must pass 3 trials, each designed to test strength, intelligence, and survival skills. If you fail even one, the deal is off." Daniel took a deep breath. He wasn't a soldier, but he wasn't weak either. He had spent years negotiating with alien races, adapting to their cultures, and surviving dangerous situations. He wouldn't back down now. "All right," Daniel said with a small smirk. "Let's get started." Zira narrowed her eyes. She didn't like his confidence. Trial 1. The Test of Strength. Zira pointed toward a massive stone weighing over 200 kilograms. "A Zorinthian warrior must be strong. Lift this stone and carry it to the other side of the arena." The crowd chuckled. Even a young Zorinthian could lift such a stone, but a human, impossible. Daniel walked up to the stone and placed his hands on its rough surface. He tried to lift it. It didn't move. His arms tensed, his muscles strained, but it was too heavy. Laughter erupted from the audience. Zira folded her arms, expecting him to give up. But then, Daniel did something unexpected. Instead of trying to lift it straight up, he tilted the stone, rolling it onto its edge. He planted his shoulder against it and began pushing it forward, using momentum instead of raw strength. The crowd's laughter turned into whispers of surprise. Step by step, inch by inch, Daniel moved the stone across the arena. His arms burned, sweat dripped from his forehead, but he didn't stop. He refused to fail. Finally, with one last push, the stone crossed the finish line. Daniel collapsed to one knee, breathing heavily, but he had done it. Zira's jaw clenched. She had expected him to fail immediately, but the human had found another way. "You got lucky," she said, her voice cold. "The next challenge won't be so easy." Trial 2. The Test of Intelligence. Zira led Daniel to a massive puzzle wall, a complex series of glowing symbols, shifting tiles, and hidden mechanisms. "This is the labyrinth wall," Zira said. "Only those with a warrior's mind can solve it. You have 5 minutes." Daniel studied the wall. It was a mix of logic, memory, and quick thinking. He had solved difficult problems before. This was just another mental challenge. He traced the symbols with his fingers, noticing a pattern. The wall responded to touch, but pressing the wrong tile caused parts of it to reset. The audience watched in silence as Daniel worked. Some warriors had taken hours to solve this puzzle, yet he moved quickly and precisely. 4 minutes passed. Zira's confidence started to fade. How was this possible? With 20 seconds left, Daniel pressed the final tile. The wall shifted open, revealing the exit. The crowd erupted in shock. Zira's fists tightened. This was not how things were supposed to go. Trial 3. The Test of Survival. Zira's patience had run out. "Final trial," she said, leading Daniel to the Wilderness Dome, a simulated alien jungle filled with hostile creatures. "You have 1 hour to survive," she said, smirking. "Good luck, human." The gates opened, and Daniel stepped inside. The challenge was far from over. The massive gates of the Wilderness Dome slammed shut behind Daniel, sealing him inside. The air was thick and humid, filled with the scent of alien plants. Towering trees with glowing leaves stretched high into the artificial sky, their twisted roots forming natural barriers. Strange creatures rustled in the bushes, their glowing eyes watching him from the shadows. Outside the dome, Princess Zira stood with her arms crossed, watching through the observation screens. This trial was different from the last two. It wasn't about lifting heavy stones or solving puzzles. This was about survival, and she was certain the human wouldn't last an hour. "Let's see how fragile you really are, Daniel," she muttered under her breath. Into the jungle. Daniel took a deep breath and scanned his surroundings. The jungle was alive with movement. Strange birds with razor-like wings screeched from the treetops. A long, snake-like creature slithered between the roots, its scales reflecting the faint blue glow of the plants. His instincts told him one thing: standing still was not an option. Daniel moved forward, stepping carefully to avoid making noise. His boots sank slightly into the damp soil as he pushed past thick vines. He had no weapons, no supplies, only his mind and his will to survive. After 10 minutes of walking, he reached a small clearing. There was a pool of water, its surface perfectly still. Daniel crouched down and dipped his fingers in. Safe for drinking. He wasn't sure. He had studied some alien environments before, but nothing like this. Suddenly, the water rippled. Daniel jumped back just in time as a massive, four-legged predator lunged out. It had dark red fur, sharp fangs, and piercing yellow eyes. It let out a deep, rumbling growl before circling him. Daniel's heart pounded. He had no way to fight a beast like this. He needed a plan. Outsmarting the beast, the predator lunged again, its claws slashing toward him. Daniel rolled to the side, barely dodging in time. He scrambled to his feet, looking around for something, anything he could use. Then he saw it. A large tree nearby of hanging vines, strong enough to hold weight, if he could just lure the creature into the right position. Daniel backed up slowly, making sure the beast followed. He positioned himself under the tree, gripping one of the vines behind his back. "Come on, big guy," he muttered. The predator charged. At the last second, Daniel jumped to the side, pulling the vine with all his strength. The vine snapped loose, releasing a massive branch above. Crash! The heavy branch slammed onto the beast, pinning it to the ground. The creature let out an angry roar, thrashing beneath the weight, but it couldn't get up. Daniel let out a shaky breath. That was close. Zyra's shock. Outside the dome, the crowd watching the screens fell silent. Daniel had done the impossible again. Princess Zyra's eyes narrowed. "How?" she whispered. She had expected him to run, to panic, but instead, he had trapped one of the deadliest creatures in the jungle using only his surroundings. Her respect for him was growing, though she didn't want to admit it. The final challenge. Daniel knew the trial wasn't over. He had to last an hour, and there were more dangers ahead. Moving quickly, he gathered large leaves and vines to craft a makeshift shelter. He climbed a tree and secured himself in the branches, away from ground predators. From this height, he could see the jungle stretching far into the distance. For the next half hour, he remained alert, watching for danger. When a group of insect-like creatures passed below, their sharp legs slicing through the dirt, Daniel remained perfectly still. He was tired. His muscles ached, but he refused to give up. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, a loud chime echoed through the jungle. The trial was over. The gates opened, and Daniel climbed down, walking back toward the exit. His clothes were torn, his hands dirty, but he was alive. A new respect. As Daniel stepped out, the crowd of Zorinthians stared at him in shock. No human should have been able to survive that. Zyra stood waiting for him, her expression unreadable. "You survived," she said simply. Daniel gave a small, tired smile. "Told you I would." For the first time, Zyra didn't have a sharp remark. She simply studied him for a moment before turning away. "The trials are over," Emperor Varkan announced, stepping forward. "Daniel Carter has passed all three." A murmur ran through the crowd. Daniel had proven himself. But what came next? Zyra wasn't sure anymore. The grand hall of the Zorinthian palace was filled with silence. The golden pillars stretched high into the ceiling, and torches lit the massive chamber with a soft blue glow. Hundreds of nobles, warriors, and officials stood gathered, their eyes locked on one person, Daniel. He had passed all three trials, something no one had expected. The Zorinthians had assumed he would fail, that he would break under the pressure. Instead, he had proven himself, using his intelligence, quick thinking, and determination. At the front of the hall, sitting on his throne of obsidian, Emperor Varkan studied the human with an expression of deep thought. His golden armor gleamed under the torchlight, and his sharp, reptilian eyes showed no emotion. Princess Zyra stood beside her father, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. She had been so certain Daniel would fail. And yet, he had survived. The Emperor finally spoke. "Daniel Carter," his deep voice echoed through the hall. "You have passed the trials of strength intelligence, and survival. You have proven that humans are not as weak as we believed. Murmurs spread among the nobles. Some nodded in agreement while others frowned. The emperor continued, "According to the ancient traditions, the one who passes the trials is worthy of." Before he could finish, Zaira stepped forward. "Father, wait," she said firmly. Her sharp blue eyes focused on Daniel. "He may have passed the trials, but that does not mean he should become my mate." A wave of shock passed through the crowd. Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Mate? Wait, was that what this was all about?" Zaira clenched her jaw. She had never wanted this. From the start, she had rejected the idea of being bonded to a human. The trials were supposed to prove he wasn't worthy. But now she was trapped by the very rules she had relied on. She turned back to her father. There must be another way. Another test. Another. The emperor raised a hand, silencing her. Enough. Zaira fell silent, frustration clear in her expression. Emperor Varkan stood from his throne and slowly descended the steps. "Daniel Carter," he said, his voice filled with authority, "you have passed the trials. However, the choice is still yours." Daniel frowned. "Choice?" The emperor nodded. "According to our traditions, you have earned the right to bond with the princess. But if you choose not to, you will be given a great reward and allowed to leave." A wave of relief washed over Zaira. Good. The human could just take his prize and leave. Daniel, however, remained quiet, thinking. He hadn't expected this. He had come here as a diplomat, not a warrior. And now he was being asked to make a decision that could change the course of human-Zorinthian relations forever. Zaira stared at him, waiting for him to refuse. But instead he asked, "And what happens if I choose to stay?" The hall grew silent. Zaira's heart skipped a beat. The emperor smiled slightly. "Then you will be bonded to Princess Zaira, and you will become a recognized member of the Zorinthian royal family. You will have power, influence, and the protection of the empire." Zaira couldn't believe what she was hearing. Why wasn't Daniel immediately saying no? Daniel looked at Zaira. "And what does she think about all this?" The princess straightened, her face hard. "I told you before, I will not bond with a human." Daniel smirked slightly. "You mean you don't want to, or you don't think you should?" Zaira opened her mouth to answer but hesitated. Daniel sighed and turned back to the emperor. "I need time to think." The emperor nodded. "Very well. You will have 3 days to decide." The tension in the room remained as the emperor dismissed the court. The nobles and warriors slowly left, whispering among themselves. As Daniel turned to leave, Zaira suddenly stepped in front of him. "Why are you even considering this?" she asked, her voice sharp. Daniel met her gaze. "Because maybe I want to know why you're so against it." Zaira narrowed her eyes. "I don't need a reason." Daniel chuckled. "Everyone has a reason, princess." With that, he walked past her, leaving her standing alone in the grand hall. For the first time in her life, Princess Zaira didn't know what to do. The Zorinthian palace was quieter than usual. The nobles and warriors had gone back to their duties, but the air still carried whispers about Daniel Carter's decision. Some saw him as a warrior who had proven himself, while others saw him as an outsider who did not belong. Daniel sat in his guest chamber, staring out of the tall window. The alien city stretched below, glowing in shades of blue and gold. He had been given 3 days to decide whether he would stay and bond with Princess Zaira or leave with a reward. It should have been an easy choice. He had come here as a diplomat, not a warrior, and certainly not as a future prince. But something about Zaira's strong rejection made him curious. Why did she despise the idea so much? The door suddenly swung open. Daniel turned and saw General Korak, a towering Zorinthian warrior with scarred golden skin and piercing red eyes. Korak was one of the Emperor's most trusted commanders. "You should take the reward and leave," Korak said without hesitation. Daniel leaned back in his chair. No greeting, no small talk. Korak's face remained serious. This is not a joke, human. If you choose to bond with the princess, you will make many enemies. Daniel frowned. Enemies. Korak stepped closer. Kazera is not just a princess. She is the heir to the throne. Many believe she should be bonded to a powerful warrior, not an outsider. Daniel folded his arms. And what does Skyra think? Korak hesitated for a moment. She follows tradition, but she has always believed she should choose her own mate. Daniel sighed. And now she doesn't have a choice. Korak nodded. Exactly. That is why she fights so hard against this. Daniel rubbed his temples. So if I accept, I make enemies. If I refuse, I get to walk away. The general's eyes narrowed. Yes. So why are you hesitating? Daniel smirked. Because I don't like being told what to do. An unexpected meeting. Later that evening, Daniel found himself walking through the royal gardens. The air was cool, and the strange alien flowers glowed faintly in the darkness. He needed time to think. That was when he saw Skyra. She stood near a small fountain, her long dark hair flowing in the breeze. She hadn't noticed him yet. Daniel took a deep breath and stepped closer. Couldn't sleep either. Skyra turned, her blue eyes flashing. What do you want, human? Daniel leaned against a nearby tree. Maybe I just want to talk. Skyra scoffed. There is nothing to talk about. Daniel raised an eyebrow. You don't seem like someone who follows tradition. So why do you care about this bond so much? For a moment, Skyra didn't answer. Then she looked away, staring at the water. Because it's not about me, she said quietly. Daniel frowned. What do you mean? Skyra sighed. The bond isn't just a tradition. It's a political tool. If I bond with a powerful warrior, it strengthens my rule. It secures alliances. My people will respect me. Daniel nodded slowly. But if you bond with me? Skyra turned to face him. They will see me as weak. Daniel was silent for a moment. Then he smirked. Well, that's stupid. Skyra's eyes widened. Excuse me? Daniel crossed his arms. You passed those trials just like I did, right? You fought in battles, earned your rank. If your people don't respect you because of who you bond with, then maybe they're the weak ones. Skyra stared at him, surprised by his words. For the first time, she had no argument. A new understanding. Silence filled the garden as Skyra thought about what Daniel had said. He wasn't like the warrior she had known. He didn't care about status or power. He spoke his mind, and he challenged her in ways no one else had. For the first time, she asked herself, was she fighting against him because she didn't want to bond with a human? Or was she afraid of what it might mean if she did? Daniel sighed. Look, Skyra, I haven't made my decision yet, but I'm not your enemy. Maybe you should stop treating me like one. Skyra looked at him, her expression softer than before. Maybe. Without another word, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the garden. Daniel watched her leave, realizing something important. He wanted to know more about her. The following morning, Daniel stood at the training grounds, watching Zorinthian warriors spar with their weapons. Their movements were fast, precise, and deadly. Unlike humans, Zorinthians were stronger, with faster reflexes and natural armor on parts of their bodies. He knew that if he were to stay, he couldn't afford to be seen as weak. He had passed the trials, but earning respect was another battle entirely. Just as he was thinking about it, a voice spoke behind him. You're up early. Daniel turned to see Skyra, standing with her arms crossed. She wore a light combat suit instead of her royal robes. Her blue eyes studied him carefully. He smirked. Didn't expect to see you here. Skyra shrugged. If you're really considering staying, then you need to train. You passed the trials, but surviving in our world takes more than that. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Are you offering to train me? Skyra sighed. I can't have you embarrassing my people. Daniel chuckled. Right. Just looking out for your people. Not worried about me at all. Zyra ignored the comment and tossed him a training staff. Come on, human. Let's see what you can do. Training with the princess. The two of them stepped onto the sparring ground. Other warriors stopped to watch, interested in how the human would fare against their princess. Zyra held her staff with perfect control, her stance balanced. Daniel, on the other hand, held his with an uncertain grip. He had trained in hand-to-hand combat before, but this was different. Zyra wasted no time. She moved fast, swinging at Daniel's side. He barely managed to block, the impact sending a sharp vibration through his arms. Too slow, she said. Daniel gritted his teeth and tried to counterattack, but she dodged easily. She was toying with him. The warriors around them chuckled. Daniel knew what they were thinking. The human is weak. But he wasn't about to give up. He took a deep breath and changed his strategy. Instead of attacking her directly, he focused on reading her movements. He waited for her next strike. Then, at the last moment, he sidestepped. Zyra's staff missed. Before she could recover, Daniel spun and knocked her weapon aside. The warriors watching fell silent. Zyra took a step back, surprised. Then, for the first time since they met, she smiled. A real smile. Not bad, human, she said. Daniel smirked. I learned fast. A moment of understanding. After the sparring session, Daniel and Zyra sat on a bench, watching the other warriors train. Zyra glanced at him. You're different from what I expected. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Let me guess. You thought I'd be weak. Helpless. Zyra didn't deny it. I thought you would give up, but you keep fighting. Daniel sighed. Back on Earth, humans had to fight for survival for thousands of years. We may not be the strongest species, but we never stopped pushing forward. Zyra was silent for a moment. Then she asked, Why are you really considering staying? Daniel looked at her. He could have said it was about diplomacy, about proving something to the Zorinthians. But the truth was more complicated. I want to understand your people, he admitted. And I want to understand you. Zyra's eyes widened slightly. She wasn't used to people speaking to her like that, honestly, without fear. She stood up. I have duties to attend to. Daniel watched as she walked away, but before she left, she paused. Without turning around, she said, Meet me at the Royal Archives tonight. There's something you need to see. Daniel frowned. What is it? Zyra hesitated, then said, The truth about the bond. That night, Daniel made his way to the Royal Archives. The palace was quiet, with only a few guards patrolling the halls. He wasn't sure what Zyra wanted to show him, but he could tell it was something important. When he arrived, the massive doors of the archives opened on their own, revealing a vast chamber filled with floating data scrolls and ancient records. Zyra was already there, standing near a glowing table. You're late, she said without looking at him. Daniel smirked. Didn't know we were on a schedule. Zyra ignored his comment and gestured to the table. I want to show you something. She waved her hand over the table, and a holographic image appeared. It showed a historical record, a scene from the past where a human stood beside a Zorinthian queen. Daniel frowned. What is this? Zyra's voice was calm but serious. This is the first recorded bond between a human and a Zorinthian. Daniel looked at her in surprise. Wait, this has happened before. Zyra nodded. A long time ago, before our people cut ties with yours. But it wasn't just a simple partnership. The bond between them was something much deeper. Daniel watched as the image shifted. The human and the queen stood together, their hands glowing with a strange blue energy. A feeling of power, connection, and something more than just alliance was clear between them. What's happening? Daniel asked. Zyra's expression was unreadable. The bond isn't just symbolic. It is something real, something powerful. Daniel crossed his arms. You mean it's some kind of magic? Zyra frowned. not magic. It's something in our biology. When a Zorinthian bonds with a mate, it creates a lifelink. Their minds, their emotions, even their strength become connected. Daniel's breath caught. Wait, so if I bonded with you? Zyra nodded. You wouldn't just be my mate in name. We would be connected. If one of us grows stronger, the other does too. If one of us is hurt, the other feels it. Daniel stared at her, realizing the true weight of the decision. This wasn't just a political alliance. This wasn't just about proving himself. This was permanent. The real reason Zyra rejected him. Daniel finally understood why Zyra had been so against bonding with him. She wasn't just rejecting the human. She was rejecting the idea of being permanently connected to someone she didn't choose. Daniel sighed. So that's why you fought so hard against this. It's not just about your people. It's about losing control over your own life. Zyra looked away. For the first time, she seemed uncertain. I was raised to believe that I should choose my bond mate carefully. But now, because of the trials, I am being forced into it. Daniel leaned against the table. That's not fair to you. Zyra's eyes snapped to him. You understand that? Daniel nodded. Of course I do. Where I come from, people should have the right to choose who they share their life with. Zyra studied him carefully. And yet, you're still considering staying. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. Yeah, because something tells me there's more to this than history and tradition. And honestly, I'm not the type to run away just because something is difficult. Zyra exhaled slowly. You are truly unlike any human I've met before. Daniel smirked. I get that a lot. A dangerous decision. Before they could say anything else, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the chamber. Zyra immediately stood in front of Daniel, her body tense. Someone's coming. Daniel turned to see a group of armored warriors entering the archives. Leading them was General Korak, his red eyes gleaming with authority. What are you doing here, human? Korak's voice was firm, filled with suspicion. Zyra stepped forward. I brought him here. Korak's gaze darkened. The bond between you two is no longer just a rumor. The nobles are watching, and not all of them are pleased. Some believe you are corrupting tradition by showing favor to an outsider. Daniel sighed. Let me guess, they don't want a human in the royal family. Korak nodded. They see it as a threat to Zorinthian strength. Zyra clenched her fists. This is my choice, not theirs. Korak hesitated for a moment before speaking again. There is another problem. Daniel frowned. What problem? The general's expression was grim. Someone has put a bounty on your head, human. Daniel's stomach tightened. Great, just what I needed. Zyra's face darkened with anger. Who? Korak shook his head. The bounty was placed anonymously, but it is clear that someone wants the human gone, permanently. Daniel took a deep breath. His decision had just become even more complicated. If he chose to stay, he wouldn't just have to win the respect of the Zorinthians. He would have to survive. The tension in the royal archives was thick. Daniel stood tall, his mind racing with the news that a bounty had been placed on his head. A bounty, he repeated, looking at General Korak. So someone wants me dead. Korak's face remained unreadable. Yes, the amount is high enough that many will come for you. Warriors, assassins, mercenaries. Daniel exhaled. Well, that's just great. I haven't even decided if I'm staying, and people already want me gone. Beside him, Zyra's expression darkened. This is an act of cowardice. They fear change so much that they would kill an outsider instead of facing the truth. Daniel glanced at her. And what is the truth? Zyra met his eyes. That you might be stronger than they expected. A dangerous offer. Korak took a step forward. There is a way to remove the bounty, but it is risky. Daniel folded his arms. Let me guess. It involves me fighting someone. Korak nodded. A formal challenge. If you defeat the one who placed the bounty, It will prove that you are not weak, and no one will question your presence in the kingdom. Daniel sighed. I was hoping for a peaceful solution, but I guess that's not how things work here. Thyra turned to Korak. Who placed the bounty? The general hesitated. Lord Varric. Zyra's eyes flashed with fury. Varric? That arrogant fool. Daniel frowned. I take it he's not a fan of humans. Zyra clenched her fists. He's one of the most powerful nobles in the kingdom. He believes only the strong should rule, and that Zorinthians should never bond with outsiders. Daniel smirked. Sounds like a fun guy. Korak remained serious. The challenge is tomorrow. You have one night to prepare. Daniel sighed. Guess I better not waste it. A moment of truth. That night, Daniel stood on the balcony of the palace, looking at the stars. He had come so far, from being an outsider to passing the trials, to now being challenged for his right to stay. He heard footsteps behind him. Zyra. You should rest, she said. Daniel chuckled. Hard to sleep when you know someone wants to kill you. Zyra leaned on the railing beside him. For a moment, she was silent. Then she spoke softly. Do you regret coming here? Daniel thought for a moment. No, but I won't lie. This isn't exactly what I expected. Zyra looked at him. I never expected you either. But now, I see why you're different. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Oh, how's that? Zyra hesitated, then said, because you don't run from danger. You face it, even when the odds are against you. Daniel chuckled. I don't always win, though. Zyra smirked. But you always fight. For a moment, they simply stood there, looking at each other. Then, Zyra took a deep breath. Daniel, if you lose tomorrow, they will kill you. Daniel nodded. Yeah, I figured. Zyra hesitated before speaking again. Then let me train you. Daniel blinked. Wait, you? I thought you didn't want me here. Zyra sighed. I didn't. But things have changed. You have changed. Daniel smirked. Is that your way of saying you like me now? Zyra rolled her eyes. Don't push your luck, human. The final training. Zyra led Daniel to the royal training ground, where she handed him a Zorinthian blade. It was lighter than a human sword, but sharp enough to cut through metal. Varric is strong, Zyra said as she circled him. He will not hold back. If you hesitate, you will die. Daniel gripped the sword. Then I guess I better not hesitate. They began sparring. At first, Daniel struggled. Zyra was faster and stronger, her strikes almost too quick to follow. But Daniel wasn't just strong. He adapted. After an hour, he dodged her attack. After 2 hours, he countered her strike. By the 3rd hour, he landed a hit. Zyra stepped back, breathing hard. You're learning. Daniel smirked. Told you. I learned fast. She stared at him, then nodded. You might actually have a chance tomorrow. Daniel exhaled. Let's hope you're right. As the night ended, Zyra hesitated before speaking. No matter what happens tomorrow, know this. I do not see you as weak anymore. Daniel smiled. Coming from you, that means a lot. Zyra nodded. Rest now. Tomorrow, you fight for your place here. Daniel looked at the rising moons in the sky. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for something bigger. And he was ready. The arena was silent. Thousands of Zorinthians gathered in the stands, watching as Daniel stepped into the circle of combat. His opponent, Lord Varric, stood on the other side, his red eyes filled with disdain. Varric was tall, muscular, and covered in battle scars. His armor gleamed under the twin suns, and his blade pulsed with energy. Daniel exhaled. He was just a human, fighting against one of the strongest Zorinthian warriors. But he wasn't afraid. Not anymore. Zyra stood at the edge of the arena, watching him. Their training had been brutal, but now he was ready. You do not belong here, human, Varric sneered. I will end this quickly. Daniel smirked. You can try. A deep gong echoed through the arena. The fight had begun, a battle of strength and strategy. Varric charged first, swinging his blade in a powerful arc. Daniel barely dodged in time, feeling the air crackle as the sword passed inches from his face. He countered with a quick slash, but Varric blocked effortlessly. Clang! The impact shook Daniel's arms, but he didn't let go. Instead, he used his smaller size and speed, dodging and weaving around Varric's attacks. The crowd roared as the battle intensified. Varric fought with pure power, every strike meant to crush Daniel in one blow. Daniel fought with precision, avoiding direct clashes and striking only when he saw an opening. Slash! Daniel's blade cut across Varric's arm, drawing blue blood. Varric growled, his pride wounded. You are more trouble than I expected. Daniel smirked. And you talk too much. Varric's eyes glowed with rage. He raised his sword, and suddenly, the blade crackled with energy. The ground beneath Daniel shook. The hidden power of the bond. Varric swung his sword down, and a shockwave exploded from the impact. Daniel barely leaped away, but the force sent him flying. He crashed onto the sand, gasping for breath. Varric stalked forward, his sword pulsing with deadly energy. This is the power of a true warrior, Varric declared. You cannot match me. Daniel struggled to stand. His arms were sore, his body aching. He could feel the weight of the fight pressing down on him. And then, a warm presence filled his mind. Syra. She wasn't speaking, but Daniel felt her. And suddenly, he understood. The bond. It wasn't just a connection. It was strength shared between two people. And Syra was giving him hers. A strange energy filled Daniel's body. His exhaustion faded. His movements became sharper, faster, stronger. Varric frowned. What is this? Daniel smiled. My turn. The turning point. Varric charged again, but this time, Daniel moved faster. He dodged easily, sidestepping the massive warrior. Varric swung his blade, but Daniel was already behind him. With a single, precise strike. Slash! Daniel's blade cut deep into Varric's leg. The warrior stumbled, shock flashing in his eyes. The crowd gasped. Daniel didn't stop. He struck again, this time, disarming Varric, sending his sword flying across the sand. Varric fell to one knee, breathing heavily. He had lost. Daniel held his blade to Varric's throat. Yield. The arena was silent. Varric clenched his fists, then bowed his head. I yield. The gong rang. The battle was over. Daniel had won. The aftermath. The crowd erupted in cheers. Some were surprised, others shocked, but no one could deny what had happened. Daniel had earned his place. Syra stepped forward, her eyes unreadable. You did it. Daniel smirked. Told you I wouldn't die. She hesitated for a moment, then said, I knew you wouldn't. The realization hit Daniel. She had trusted him all along. A new future. As the celebration began, Korik approached. You are no longer just an outsider, Daniel. You have proven yourself. The bounty is gone, and you have the right to stay. Daniel nodded. Good, because I'm not going anywhere. He looked at Tyra, and for the first time, she didn't look away. Maybe this wasn't just about survival anymore. Maybe this was the beginning of something more. The end.